Welcome to the continued study of Matthew, particularly the study of this fantastic and wonderful passage in Matthew 24. This is where Jesus was, by the Spirit of God, predicting the future. He could see it. Especially, I believe, the future right there close to his life and not so much the end times here, although some of that happens, I believe, probably later on in the passage, which we'll get to. It's leading up to that. But he's answering questions, the when, what. And the second question, what, was more about, kind of you can combine those into two questions. When shall these things be, and what shall be the signs of the coming, signs of the end times, or the end of the age. Okay, so if you remember, Jesus was talking about earlier how this is the beginning of birth pang, or pain, the birth pangs, and then he goes on and talks about persecution. You guys are going to get persecuted. He was preparing the minds of the apostles. And then he said that whoever endures to the end shall be saved. You got to persevere, and you don't give up, and you don't deny the faith. You say, yeah, I'm still a Christian. I'm going to follow Jesus no matter what. It's a great attitude for you and I to have, right? Pleases God. Only those who last, who finish on the finish line as a believer. Let's say you're running on a track and things are really tough. You say, I'm getting off this track. I want to sit out in the stands and watch these Christians do it and not really live the life. No, you endure to the end. You continue until you get to the finish line. Those are the ones that actually get salvation. Salvation from the wrath of God, the judgments of God, and all. So it's really good. All right, then Jesus then said, if you remember, that when the gospel is going to be preached throughout the world. And now what he says, he goes into really very, very specific things. And this was not foreseen. They went, what? What he said. And this is where we're going to get into this next passage. By the way, there's two other gospel writers that wrote parallel passages that say a lot of the same stuff. It's in Mark 13 and Luke 21. If you want to read those, you don't want to be lazy. You want to pick these things up and read them. And so in Mark 13 and Luke 21, those writers wrote the same stuff that Jesus wrote here, to the point where it even says some of the exact same things. And they really knew this. They knew what Jesus was saying, even to the point where they said, let the reader understand. Let the reader actually, who's reading this, understand. Mark says that, as well as Matthew says that. And this is a passage that we're getting into. And so, again, here are the questions here that the disciples had asked him, the apostles. When, and they were talking about Jerusalem, is particularly the temple. When is this going to be destroyed? Is what they were asking. When? They would say, well, when is this? And 40 years later, after he said this passage right here, it happened. And then what are the signs, and also of the end of the age? Signs of your coming and end of the age. And so now he says, he picks it back up and he says, when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And that's when he said, let the reader understand this. Like whoever read Daniel, both Mark and Matthew said this, who knows about Daniel, whoever reads this, will realize that Daniel mentioned this thing called, big words here, abomination of desolation. We could talk about that for a little bit here. For a little while. But I will say what it's saying. An abomination is something that's disgusting to God, something that's hated by God. It's really bad, some evil thing that causes desolation is one of the means. I think that's what he's saying. This abomination that causes this desolation, like destruction, that is going to be emptied. It's going to be flattened. And that's what the Jerusalem and the temple is going to be flattened. And Luke mentions the idea of armies surround the city. It's the armies of Rome surround the city. And that's what happened in 66 AD. That when they started coming in and starting to take over Jerusalem. All right, so here it is. This is a temple right here. And I believe that Titus and all that, when he went in here, that well, Josephus mentions they brought idols into the temple, the Roman army, and set it up there, and that's abominations. Plus, they set up like the banners and symbols of eagles and all that up there. So not good. That's an abomination of desolation. The unholy things being brought into the holy temple. And so that's what happened. That's what caused this desolation. That's what caused the destruction and the judgment of God on Jerusalem. So again, that's that. Let me read that. It says, when you therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. So that's what he's saying here. Whenever they see this, see, that's what he said. That's when it's going to happen. He's telling the answers to these questions when Jerusalem is going to be destroyed and all. He's literally right there now. He could actually foresee it. He saw it happening. And when you see it, you flee it. And that's the next verse. He says, when you see these things happen, when you start seeing the armies surround the city, he said, then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. So he says, anybody in the Judea area, because that's when it's going to happen, the armies are starting to come down. When you see this happen, and flee to the mountains. Leave Jerusalem, which is where the city was, where the temple was and all. Leave Jerusalem and flee to the mountains. Go down here, or maybe up here, or over here. Just get to the mountains, hide. And over history, over a lot of ages, people a lot of times hid in the mountains. It could be even wicked people like thieves and all that, robbers. And David hid in the caves and the mountains from Saul in the Bible. And so they did that. By the way, in about 66, 67, 68, as the armies were starting to come closer and closer and coming around Jerusalem, Christians are said by a guy named Eusebius, they actually took the words of Jesus and they obeyed him, and not one Christian was hurt in all this time. All the disciples, the followers of Jesus, left. They left. They started seeing it come, and they remembered those words, and they ran. And they hid, and they went way down here to a place called Pella. And they also went other places, I believe. But anyway, they got out of there. And so the warnings of Jesus was actually heeded. They were paid attention to, and they actually obeyed Jesus, and they saved their lives because of it. So he warned them, and they did it. You got to flee Judea. And then the next one is, if you're on a housetop, and houses in those days, and I think nowadays, a lot of them are flat. So a lot of people used to hang out here, especially in the heat of the day. Or even nighttime was kind of hot sometimes, so they'd come up here and sleep, or they'd do other things up here. Maybe they would hang their clothes like laundry and things. They ate up there a lot of times, right on the roof. Kids would play on the roofs, by the way. A lot of them had this railing here. But anyway, there was a staircase a lot of times on the outside of it, and he said, don't enter your house. Like if you see them coming, the calamity is there. It suddenly happens. It says, don't run down into your house and get your clothes or get any of your belongings. Get off of the roof and then flee. Like I mentioned up here, flee, get out of town. That's what he said there. Let me read it. It says, let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Like, don't even worry about your belongings, your valuables, get out of there. Oh my goodness, they're starting to come, run, get out of there. Run, get out of the town. And he also mentions if you're in the field here, and this is a town right back there. This guy's working in the fields out there. He says, don't go back into the city to get your belongings or anything. Just run like crazy. Get out of there. Get away from it. So let's say this guy's out there and he sees from a distance the armies of Rome starting to come. He says, oh, I got to get out of here. And he ran the other way before they could surround the town. So that's what this guy is doing. Let me read that. Jesus said, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Don't even take your clothes. Just run like crazy out of there. So that's that one. Then it says, woe to I said it, new moms, the ones who are pregnant and the ones who are having little tiny babies and they're nursing the babies and all. This is supposed to be a woman that's pregnant. My drawing, oh my goodness. And there's a little mom who has a baby here. he said, woe to those, like, oh my goodness, it's going to be more difficult for the moms. Woe unto them which are with child, that means pregnant, and to them which give suck in those days. So there's that one. And then he said, pray, like, keep praying like this, that it won't be in the winter that it happens or on the Sabbath. He said, pray that it doesn't happen in the winter or on the Sabbath. And so this guy's praying. Let me read that one. It says, but pray you that your flight, you're running away from the Jerusalem town, be not in the winter, neither in the Sabbath day. And I'll end with that, but why not in the winter and not on the Sabbath? Well, winter is, the winter is a lot of time the big time raining season, so it's not a great time to travel, and also colder at that time. So he said, pray that it doesn't be that time. It's just rougher weather. And then on the Sabbath, number one, the Sabbath of Jerusalem, they would close the gates because they don't want any work, and they would try to discourage the idea of travel. Now, there's a Sabbath day's journey, which is somewhere around a mile, or around that mile marker. And so, they would close the gates, so it's kind of harder to get out in the city. And then another thing is that you wouldn't get any help if you're traveling from the Jewish people, because they're in their homes and they're supposed to be worshiping. They're not supposed to be working, so it's going to be rougher to get get help if you need it, lodging and things. And so, it's not a really great time to travel a lot. So he said, pray that it doesn't happen in the winter or Sabbath. Well, there you go. I'll end there. We'll pick it up next time with the next verse. He talks about great tribulation. Wow. But he's saying this is a rough time that's going to happen. And when you see this happen, the abomination, desolation, and this is what your reaction should be, it's kind of what he was saying there. Yeah, pretty intense time. But Jesus, in his love and his concern for the people of God, he's warning them of what's going to happen and what to do about it. Very good. All right. Thanks for listening.